Horizontal Pedagogy. Taken from Out of the Ruins by Hayworth and Elmore, this type of pedagogy actively asks for the reinterpretation of how we learn and what the overall goals of existing within a classroom, however that classroom may manifest, and what the status of the teachers and the students really entail. It professes that too much of traditional pedagogy is alienating in a neoliberal capitalist context, and searches for new ways to go about teaching and learning in a democratic and postmodern way. Consider a rock band, or a pop band, or a country quartet, whatever you want really. There's usually a definitive songwriter in the mix that is using artistic expression to create a product designed for members to play and for fans to enjoy. Some bands function this way, but there are tons of examples of bands that try to incorporate the talents of many members in order to flesh out their sound and songs, as well as to harbor a feeling of investment and faith in the band as a whole. Now obviously, there is nothing wrong with only one musician helming the majority of the decisions of a band, as well as there is no discrete issue with a classical orchestral band playing old and iconic pieces in order to replicate a rustic and aged sentiment. The question is whether or not mixing something like traditional and progressive pedagogy is in one breath even attainable, and in the other, something that is good. In an article written by Jessica Zeller, considering ballet and pedagogical framing required to accurately achieve ballet, an important distinction of reflection is brought into the mix as perhaps one of the most beneficial aspects of progressive pedagogy that traditional can reap. Reflection on goals, intentions, and desires of what can be achieved or strive towards allow for the traditional form and learning methods of dance to be built off of, asking the students to look towards what they want to actually end up becoming through their studies. This creates a focus on the students' own innate talents and hidden goals of where they would like to innovate and develop their own path while still benefiting from traditional learning and ideas. Now, glancing back at song creation for a second, providing opportunities for young artists to be creative and encouraged to give suggestions and ideas as to where the performance should go, how the song should be written, and even what instruments should be recorded, seems to legitimize the developmental as well as soul-enriching byproduct of performing music. Whether this is in a school or personal setting, allowing for discussion and experimentation around decision-making and goal orientation produces a more qualitative learning experience. If symphonies and concert bands were the musical mirror to an industrial economy in which cog-like workers were subsumed to rigid hierarchies, lockstep coordination, and unquestioned commands, the postmodern knowledge worker is much more like an experimental composer, expected to be a content producer, an autonomous creative whose ideas are valued in proportion to their disruptive newness. It's almost like we want to have a reason to care more about what we're doing. The concept of caring is discussed in Gamso's article, Assimilating Jazz Education Methods for Traditional Applied Pedagogy. Simply put, when students start to care about learning and want to learn, either in general or about particular things, then truly powerful things can happen educationally. Then students not only care about phenomena, ideas, and the like, they also care about learning about them. This directly opposes the ideological nature found in traditional educational pedagogy that asks for students to accept the models and frames they use to learn without actually applying a calculative eye to why processes of musical research are used, and asks the student to become immersed even deeper into the world of how and why their favorite music is made. Gamso continues to describe teaching strategies that encourage students to find and teach new ways of preparing for group performance and to emphasize student ownership of the physical requirements for good tone and technical development. Jumping off of this idea of caring, the construction of space and how a student learns, once again, not specifically a traditional public school educational student, but someone engaging in a teacher-student environment, alters how a student experiences their role in their own learning and asks them to participate beyond simply forcing them to. It makes it fun, so to speak. Now, imagine a childcare facility, and if I use my own past as an example, I went to a youth group at my church when I was a child that took place in a room in the church that was all our own and was led by 2 adult supervisors. We had sofas, tables, some board games and such, but it was essentially an empty room for us to allow our minds to wander and interact with other kids socially. It allowed for decorating the walls, modifying the room in order to achieve a layout needed for different activities, bringing games and ideas to share with the greater group, and taking pride in organizing parties and events of celebration. By creating an empty space within the classroom, the structures of participation within the existing space and the roles and relationships between the children, the teacher, and the space is modified, producing a new type of socially engaging environment that allows for greater autonomy and engagement with others. This begins to bring into the question the concept of the master-student relationship, and questions the validity of dominating the learning space as a teacher and minimizing the inquiry and discussion capabilities of a student. However, going beyond the simple, I would like to do this and you would like me to do this other thing that I don't care about, an article from Scott Harrison and Catherine Grant explores the idea of why this binary relationship held between one single student and one single teacher can actually have negative effects on learning. The three main reasons they brought up include 1. The inability for a teacher to pay attention to not only the academic well-being of the student, but also the emotional, mental, and psychological health of the student. A professional, in no matter what setting, will always be perceived in an authoritarian way, essentially weakening whatever kind of effect they are trying to have on the learner in a non-professional way. Second, it limits what kind of skills the learner can gain in terms of trying to pursue a professional future in whatever they're trying to learn about. For example, let's say you're really into Tekken, or Super Smash Bros., or Mortal Kombat, or any kind of fighting game that you're trying to learn new skills in. Perhaps only taking one viewpoint on a specific character or fighting style can actually limit the player from finding new and diverse fighting styles that may actually benefit their brain and preferences. As well, it directly stands against challenging traditionalism, and claims that nothing can be added alongside the wheel in terms of groundbreaking achievement and developments. Finally, the third reason for this horizontal education, as they put it, is being aware that not all students will quote-unquote gel with all teachers. A teacher or supervisor may be particularly proficient in their field, but maybe the hierarchical intimidation of being a subordinate under a powerhouse figure actually harms the desire to learn or ask questions, or maybe comfort and ease becomes difficult to attain. Now, for a second, shift your focus towards something like community-based learning, or at least focusing on content that primarily benefits a local community connecting to serious and delicate social problems in order to create a deeper connection to researched information. A study was conducted that looked at psychology students working with local trauma relief groups to research violence against women with community-based pedagogy methods. This involved working directly with the groups and allowing for a deeper connection to the subject due to the relevancy the research had to the students' own lives and communities, reporting that they felt their work mattered more and helped them to feel more engaged with the content. This seems to make sense, as working locked in a classroom, having to idealize what assisting and researching the effects of trauma, as opposed to working with people who actually help real victims, helps students actualize and legitimate their own academia in reality. There's a phenomenon in traditional pedagogy that is brought upon by neoliberal capitalism, where something I would like to call collective individualism actively entices students, or at least people in learning positions, say at a place of occupational work, where it is almost a bad thing to give the wrong answer or to admit that one is confused. An article that discusses teaching integrals to mature mathematics students concludes with a statement I found rather pertinent to this, sharing that they are more concerned with getting the right answer than understanding what they are actually doing. You don't want to appear dumb, or like you weren't paying attention even though either you truly were, or maybe you had 40 other things going through your mind at the time of explanation. But at the end of the day, it seems like students just don't simply want to appear weak. The modern collective individualistic world wants you to be strong, to not rely on others, to improvise instead of inquire, to know the least amount of information in order to get the most amount of product, to get the degree to make money so that you don't have to learn anymore. The concept of difference, such as difference of opinion or difference of intent, goes directly against the efficiency and speed of neoliberal capitalism, and asks for things to slow down and have whomever is in the teaching position, whether that is an appointed teacher or peer, to explain something that is not directly obvious to the person asking the question, whether it is an interpersonal setting or even an online one. An idea that comes to mind is during something like a Discord call with friends when working on a group project outside of traditional academia. It can be intimidating to disagree with someone because of that lack of humanly radiant understanding to democratically move as a group in order to satisfy the whole team. Conflict and an exchange of ideas helps to nurture how a group decides on the best approach to an issue, and asks for hierarchical constraint and manipulation to exit so that each member can feel as though they are all required for the project to properly reach fruition. Now, one final thing to bring up, and leaves us with a bit of thinking to do, is the grand question of curriculum and how it is supposed to function, as well as whether or not it actually functions that way. I first thought, in a traditional school setting, curriculum is handed to teachers and ultimately hidden from students, resulting in students being completely disconnected from what is expected to be taught and how long it should take to actually learn the content in question. Having binary subjects and rigid expectations of how a class should function perpetuates harmful and unnatural learning environments and outcomes, drawing attention away from the developing world of progressive social politics and once again reinforcing the idea that you need to meet a quota, which kind of seems like it's almost preparing us all for something in the working world, though I can't quite put my finger on it. Making a student feel bad that the one or two subjects they excel in that exist outside of the traditional curriculum goals seems almost morally wrong, and insists that there is no way to find academic outcomes pertaining to these subcultural topics and areas. How should we teach? How should we learn? What should we try to achieve in terms of surpassing our limits and jumping headfirst into the potential of academia? True democratic systems of exchanging ideas, accessing knowledge bases exterior to the expected norms, experimenting, becoming involved in our communities, and challenging what is traditional means democracy. It involves the process of resisting stagnancy, being aware that life is not about working, it is not about meeting a quota, and it is not about earning peace and quiet after completing a set of mundane and borderline pointless tasks at bullshit jobs. Taking pride in discussion, assisting others, exhibiting humility, and managing power amongst many. Being aware that there's always something that can be learned and taken out of an experience is the key to a truly democratic career and activity and occupation. Horizontal pedagogy is about allowing everyone to be a teacher, to move past cutting corners and doing the bare minimum, and encouraging mastery of a topic that truly speaks to oneself, regardless of capitalistic benefit towards stockholders and nameless entities that only wish they could be half as interesting and creative as the majority of the population of the world. Thank you.